Welcome back to another video, guys. It's been a busy winter for me, but I finally have a little bit of time to dedicate to the CRZ. So today we're going to be starting on restoring the Noblesse rear spoiler. Okay, so in my last video I briefly mentioned the spoiler that we picked up from a Japanese auction site. It's an authentic Noblesse carbon spoiler, and it definitely needs a bit of work to get it back to tip-top shape. The clear coat on this center carbon piece is completely ruined. We'll have to refinish that, get it looking back to normal. We also need to repair and or replace most of the hardware for mounting to the car and the three pieces together. We're going to take out these little foam pads here and redesign and remake some new gaskets for good vibration and weather resistance. And we also have a couple cracks that need to be repaired, filled in, and then repainted as well. First thing I'm going to do is take this in and trace out the outlines and design some new gaskets. We're going to have these made with silicone for good weather resistance. It's also going to help give us a little tiny bit of squeeze when we're assembling the three parts and installing it on the trunk, and prevent some damage from vibration. So after waiting about a week for our silicone gaskets to show up and another few months to get a nice good layer of dust on everything, I think it's time we pick this project up and keep working on it. We've got some cracks along the edges of a couple of these pieces that need filling and repainting, and so we're going to kind of sand these out, get some fresh paint on there, make them look nice and new again. Oh, I almost forgot about you down there. Who's a good little troll? Here, have a disclaimer. I am by no means a professional when it comes to body work. In fact, this is the first time I've ventured into anything at all in this category. So I really have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to repairing fiberglass, doing automotive paint, nothing like that. No experience, I'm learning as I go. I've done a bit of research, but obviously this is not going to be perfect. It's probably not the ideal materials and methods to use. So if you know better and have tips and tricks for next time, I'd love to hear some constructive criticism in the comments and learn more about how to do this properly. But as for now, it's just a DIY project, and I'm just making it look as good as I can with the tools and skills I have at my disposal. So don't take this part of the video as any kind of tutorial or guide on how to properly do this type of restoration. But if you're interested in seeing how I tackle it and how the results turn out, then let's follow along. So on both chunks of our spoiler here, we've got areas where it's been cracked. I'm not sure if this is from collision damage or just improper installation, something like that. And it's not super structural. I mean, the piece is still quite stable. But what I'd like to do is fill in these gaps, sand them down, get them smooth again, and paint over them so it looks like a brand new part and it's a little more structurally sound for road use. Now we've also got these original adhesive foam gaskets on the bottom side of the spoiler mount here, and they're okay, but they're starting to degrade, and the silicone gaskets we have cover the entire bottom. So I'm going to try and get these scraped off, get it cleaned up, all the adhesive residue gone, so we have a nice clean base to mount with. Okay, so I sprayed some Goo Gone on these to help loosen up that adhesive, so let's try and scrape this foam off. Okay, that was a bit more work than I anticipated, but we got it done. The foam is off on both of these. Turned out pretty clean. There's a little bit of residue left, but we'll get to that once we're sanding and ready to paint anyway, so... Okay, so these are dremeled out a bit, rinsed off, and we're going to go in once they're dry with some rough sandpaper just to make sure we get some good grip with our epoxy, and then we'll be ready to apply it. Okay, so we've let these sit for a couple days to make sure the epoxy is nice and fully hardened and bonded in. So now we're going to sand over it, get this smoothed down and back to the original shaping, and then we're ready for paint. Alright, so far we've been through a few stages of sanding. Everything's looking really good so far. The epoxy bonded nicely with the fiberglass, and it's smoothing over and coming to the original shape super well. I'm quite happy with it. So now it's time to move on to the actual painting. Again, I am not a professional by any means. Haven't done this before, don't have much experience. From what I understand, it's best to use adhesion promoter and then primer, and then do our base coat and clear. What I have available is self-etching primer, so that's just what I'm going to go with. We also have some areas where there is scuffs and some other clear coat peeling and bubbling from the original vehicle. So we're going to prime these repaired areas and then do some touch-up paint on that and other spots as well. And hopefully it's all going to look great when we're done. Okay, it's been a few days and we've got the paint pretty much done. I didn't video the actual process of me painting because I didn't want to do something really stupid and look bad on video, but I'll basically explain the process that I did. I ended up, after the epoxy got filled and sanded down, we did self-etching primer, did a couple coats of that, sanded down a few rough spots and did another coat of primer, let that dry. Then we did 3 coats of the colored paint, the metallic, let that dry, sanded out a couple of runs and some high spots, did a final color coat of that, let it dry for a bit, and then we did 2 coats of clear. The color match is not perfect, it's a little bit darker than the factory paint. I'm just going to chalk that up to my inexperience. From what I know, the distance you spray at, the angle, the thickness of the coats, this can all affect the color. Overall, it's not super bad, and I'm happy with it. Same with the clear. The first coat I put on was a little thick, so there's a bit of orange peel to it. But again, first time experience, I'm satisfied with the overall results. And it was really fun to learn and try this out and get some practice. So let's move on to the next step. So now let's look at the hardware. With the centerpiece mounting to the sides of the spoiler, we're using M5 stainless hardware that came with a few bolts, but they're pretty rusted out. The actual nuts inside the fiberglass are still in good shape, so we're just going to use new stainless hardware and washers. Now on the bottom we have 2 mounts. There's an M6 rivet nut and another M4 over here on the tip. On both of these, the M4 is kind of loose, it spins, which is going to make it hard to mount. And on the other spoiler piece, there's actually a seized bolt that's broken off inside. So what we're going to do is actually drill and cut out all 4 of these mounts on both spoilers and try some rubber well nuts. This should help with vibration dampening as well as protecting the fiberglass. We have a few micro spider cracks that are starting from the edges of these here, and I think it's just from the stress of that metal rivet being clamped on there. So in order to prevent any further cracking or damage, we're going to try the rubber ones, which should help out a lot. So I'm sure at this point you're wondering what we're going to do with the center section of the spoiler. And the answer is we're going to wrap it.
Wrap it. Wrap it.
Yes, I know it's going to upset a lot of carbon fiber purists out there, but I have a couple good reasons for doing this. First one is budget. I am trying to do this as inexpensively as possible, especially considering that I got the spoiler for so cheap as is. And I already have some carbon fiber vinyl laying around. So it's going to be free to use, and it's going to get a similar look on a very low cost. And the second reason is time investment. I'm already spending a lot of time on the side pieces of the spoiler, learning to body match paint, all the steps that are involved with that. And I don't have the time or the energy right now to also learn how to do new carbon resin layup or properly sanding this down without destroying it and doing clear coat on a panel this size. So for now, I am satisfied enough with just taking a quick route and doing a carbon wrap. Haters will say it's fake. They'll be right. It doesn't really bother me. I know there's a lot of people out there that say, you know, true carbon or nothing. It doesn't really matter that much to me, especially since this is not a true carbon spoiler. It's just fiberglass with a carbon layup over the outside edge. So no big deal. It's going to achieve a similar look for me. It's going to protect it for a short while, at least until I decide to refinish it the right way in the future. So that's what we're going to go with. We're going to sand this down smooth and do a carbon vinyl wrap over the surface. Okay, so far sanding the midsection is taking a little longer than I thought, and Amazon was almost here with my new mounting hardware, so I think it's a good point to stop and take a break and get ready to drill the trunk. One of the things that's going to be fun about this last stage is that we have to drill 2 holes here to mount the spoiler, but we're also going to need to drill some extra holes underneath here for accessing those bolts. So once those come in, we're going to have to be able to get the bolt up here and insert a tool as well to tighten them. And I haven't quite figured out yet where I'm going to drill or how we're going to seal that up, but it does depend on kind of where the bolts end up after the spoiler is on, so we'll see how that turns out. Okay, so Amazon just came by and brought us our well nuts. These are pretty cool because they are similar to the rivet nuts found in the original spoiler that we had, but they're better for this particular application, I think, for a couple of reasons. First off, instead of being solid metal, these are rubber, so once they're inserted and tightened down, they'll still give us a little bit of vibration resistance and help prevent the fiberglass from getting too much stress over time from the vibrations of driving the car. The original metal studs, as I said, are basically like rivets. They have to be sort of crimped onto the fiberglass, and you have to squeeze them tight enough that they don't spin, but that introduces a high chance of cracking the fiberglass and putting a lot of stress on it that we don't want. So these should be a great solution. They are also reversible, so as we tighten them down, they squeeze together and form a good grip on the spoiler, but if we need to take it off for any reason and unscrew them, the rubber re-stretches back out like this, and we can pop them back out of the spoiler, no problem. If they need to be replaced from wearing out the rubber or anything due to weather, it's easy to pop them out and put a new one in. So just as a quick example, here's how these go together. This insert with the M6 brass part and then the rubber exterior gets inserted into the holes that we have on the spoiler, and then after we mount this on the vehicle and start tightening these down, the rubber on the inside of the spoiler here will squeeze down onto the fiberglass and give it a nice secure grip. So I was hoping to finish this project today, but we're starting to get a few drops of rain and it looks like it's just going to get worse this afternoon. So I'm going to take a break, not drill any holes into my car yet, and we'll pick this up tomorrow when the weather's better. Well, it had to happen someday. I made a mistake. You see, after I finished videoing yesterday, I sat inside, it rained for maybe 10 minutes and then cleared up, and I just really wanted to get a little bit more work done, so I came out yesterday evening to drill the holes in the trunk. And I got those all done. That turned out okay. So I mounted this up temporarily to the side of the trunk just to see how it fitted and how it looked, and start getting an idea of how I was going to run bolts to it. But it was getting a little late, a little dark, so I decided to call it for the day, and I left this mounted on the car, put my cover over it, didn't think twice. Well, I came out this morning and there is a scuff and scratch line all along the edge of this piece where that cover was tensioned, and I'm assuming that my clear coat was not fully cured and hardened. It's been about 3 days. I did some more research today and it seems like I probably should have waited closer to 7, if not longer. But obviously it's dry to the touch, so I just kind of assumed it was done. So rookie mistake, but that's what DIY is all about. I mean, I'm just learning. Making mistakes is part of that. You know, you get more knowledge that way and know what to do better next time. So I'm going to keep moving with the installation process now, and at some point I will wipe this down, get it polished up a little bit, and add some fresh clear, get it looking new. But yeah, a little disappointing, but it's good to learn from it. So let's keep on going with the installation. So here's what we got done on the trunk yesterday. I've got the 2 holes drilled for the actual mounting location. On the underside, so far, I've drilled out one. The bolt is going to go through here and actually mount to the surface inside there. It's not going to mount to this surface here. So it's going to pass all the way through the trunk, and I'm going to probably use a little rubber grommet or a cap of some type to cover this hole when we're done. This other hole, there's not really much space to do that here. Depending on the angle of that bolt, I may just have the bolt sit here on the outer shell of the trunk instead of passing through to the inside. The mounting bolts that we're going to be using here are M6 stainless steel bolts with countersunk heads, and we also have some neoprene washers to give it a little bit of flex. If the angle is not quite right, this will let us kind of squeeze in there and still get it tight without having to have a flat head against a flat surface. So those are going to go inserted right through here, and our second ones we're going to drill and probably insert right about here. Okay, so let's go over the mounting process for this light. We've got our well nuts mounted up in the base here. We've got our gasket that's going to go over the top of the actual trunk. Now that our holes are drilled, we're ready to line this up and feed the bolts in and get it loosely fitted. Now this, of course, doesn't have to be precisely positioned yet. Insert our well nut here. Okay. Okay, so I mocked up the spoiler on the vehicle. I've got the outside pieces semi-mounted. They're kind of secure in there, but they're not fully tightened down yet. So I set up this centerpiece just to make sure the fitment and everything is actually good. Everything is has enough room to bolt together. And even with the added foam pads that we're putting in here, it works great. So we're going to take this off and finishing it, and then everything can go together for the permanent install. Okay, we're sanded down to about 400 now, so we're gonna clean this off with some alcohol, try and get all the fine dust out of there, and wipe it with tack, and then we will be ready to wrap. Now, I have done a couple vinyl wraps before on a previous car and on the hood of this one. I haven't wrapped anything like a full all the way around before, so it's kind of interesting, especially given the size. We're using vinyl from Avery Dennison. This is really sticky when it's out in the sun like this, and it's really easy to stretch and mold. So hopefully this is going to work out good. We're going to start on the underside. You can see this is actually where the surface is the best. But I want the seam to be under here and out of the way so it's not too visible. So we're going to start under here, wrap our way around the top so it's all clean and seamless up there, and come back and cut it down here. So the main downsides to trying to wrap this myself is, for one thing, only having two hands makes it really difficult to stretch this evenly as I'm laying it down. So I have to be really careful not to get air bubbles or creases in it. The other thing particularly about this Avery brand carbon fiber, I don't know if it's true for all the Avery ones, but it shows glue lines pretty easily. So if you have to lift up and reset the vinyl because it gets tacked down in the wrong spot or something, it makes little creases in the adhesive. Those are visible at just the right light angles. It doesn't bother me too much, and I already knew this because I did the hood with the same vinyl. But if you are looking to do a similar project, then keep that in mind. Okay, so my camera ran out of space while I was wrapping the underside, finishing up, but it turned out okay. Wrapping normally is kind of tough for a one-person job because of how steep these curves are and how much stretching is required. It really was quite difficult, but we made it work. The top layer, which was the important, mostly visible part, turned out, I'd say 90%. There's some glue lines from where I had to reset, but that's not a big deal. The underside, I sliced right along the same line here. There's a couple little pinches where I had to really stretch the vinyl, but it laid down okay, and the direction that I wrapped it, the wind and dust will be coming across the seam in such a way that there's not going to be stuff trying to get into these little folds. So it should be alright. Trimmed it up on the edges, it looks really good. So now we're finally going to get everything permanently mounted on the CRZ, and then we're going to take a little trip to test the installation, for one, which I'm kind of nervous about, and two, to go pick up some little caps to cover up the mounting bolts. The only thing I am nervous about is these rubber well nuts. They're not the greatest quality, and I've never used them before, so I don't know how tight of a grip they're really going to have. That's what we're going to find out on this next little trip. And just like that, the spoiler is finally out here. I am so excited to finally have this on after months of it sitting around. It's got a few imperfections here and there. I got it used. I had a lot of fun learning a lot of new things, putting this together and installing it. So I'm going to consider it a win. I love the way it looks. And I'm off to go pick up the extra grommets to hide the bolts, and then we'll be all wrapped up. Okay, the last thing I did was pick up a couple of these 5/8 whole plastic hole caps from Ace Hardware. Those are just going to pop right in, cover our bolts. Thanks for sticking it out through this long of a video. We're almost done. I had a couple changes that I made to the spoiler. First off was the rubber well nuts that we used in here. I did a test with the ones from Amazon on a separate bracket a little bit after the install, and I wasn't too happy with how they held up. It seems like they were really prone to the insert just pulling right through the nut instead of actually widening it out. So I got some ordered from Master Car that are better quality, a lot larger diameter as well, even more 6 bolts. So those should be a lot more secure, and I'm a lot more confident that those will stay on the trunk for a long time. I also removed those gaskets that were in between the centerpiece and outside bits of the spoiler. The extra thickness, even though it wasn't much, I think it was kind of forcing the sections of the spoiler off the trunk, so they weren't mounted totally flat. They were kind of tilted out like this, and there was gaps on the edge inside by the window. So I removed those so that it is more flush with the trunk and have a more stable mount. We'll see long term if there's any negative effects from not having vibration dampening here, but I mean, the original spoiler was made this way, so I don't think it'll be too big of a deal. So that about wraps it up for this video. Like I said, I'm super excited to have this finally installed and restored, at least to the level that I can give it. So we're going to be running this for a while now and see how it goes, and hopefully more body panels and parts will be getting painted and installed soon. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch as far as you did, and I appreciate the support. If you're interested in seeing what else we do with this car in the future, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on the future stuff we post. as well as more helpful videos for replacing parts and doing technical diagnoses and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.